Hi, I'm Kate Mackay, Associate Film Curator here at the Berkeley Art Museum and Pacific Film Archive. I'm delighted to welcome you to BAMPFA's Watch From Home live stream conversation and Q&A for Daniel Traub's fascinating documentary, Ursula von Rydingsvard, Into Her Own. If you haven't seen it yet, you can stream the documentary via bampfa.org, where you can also find our full lineup of Watch From Home offerings. Thank you to the Icarus for the documentary, and thank you very much to Daniel Traub, Ursula von Rydingsvard, and Stephen Oliver for their participation today. And last but not least, thanks to you, everyone who's tuning in. We miss seeing you in the Barbara Osher Theater, but we are very happy that you found us here. And I'd just like, by way of introduction, to say a little bit about our guests today. Daniel Traub is a New York-based filmmaker and photographer. His documentaries include The Barefoot Artist, about Lily Ye and her collaborative artworks in war-torn communities. And his photographs have exhibited internationally, including solo exhibitions at the Catherine Edelstein Gallery in Chicago, the Slow Foundation in Philadelphia, and the Lanzhou Photo Festival in China. Stephen Oliver is the president of the award-winning construction and development firm Oliver and Company, and former chairman of the board of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. He is currently serving as the board chair for the Community Arts Stabilization Trust and has served on the boards of the California College of the Arts, the California Arts Council, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Oakland Museum of California, among others. He's also on the board of the Oliver Ranch Foundation, the site of one of von Rydingsvard's wonderful monumental works. Ursula von Rydingsvard has been creating magnificent sculpture for decades, and her work is represented in the permanent collections of more than 30 museums, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Walker Art Center, and her commission pieces are on permanent display in locations across the country, here in the Bay Area at the aforementioned Oliver Ranch, also at Stanford University and at the San Francisco airport, which unfortunately none of us are accessing right now, but hopefully in the not too distant future. Our format today, we'll have a conversation of about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we'll have time for a Q&A afterwards. So please feel free to submit your questions or comments via chat at any time, and then we'll communicate them to the participants. Before we start the conversation, I'm just going to give the floor to Ursula to have the first word.
I have sometimes been asked why I make art. It's not a question I find easy to answer with any kind of clarity, but I will try to poke around some possibilities. Why do I make art? Mostly to survive, to ease my high anxiety, to numb myself with the labor and the focus of building my work. Objects, or the process by which I concretize my ideas, feel so good. Because invariably, especially with my monstrous pieces, run into intense anxiety moments from which I have to unravel myself. Because there's a pleasure in it. Because there's pain in it. Because I endure a hefty load of self-doubt. Because I see life as being full of abominations. Because life is full of marvels close to miracles. Because I still don't get who I am. Because I will never get who I am. Because my deepest admiration goes to those who have made art that has interested me. Because I want attention from those who make good art. Because I need to use both my body and my mind. The labor of my body is what keeps me awake and alive. What numbs me and offers a kind of veneer between me and the things in life which are painful to face. Because the visuals, that which I perceive through my eyes, are an extraordinarily important part of my life. Because I don't want to be doing anything else with my life, that the building of my artwork feels like the most consequential thing I could be doing with my time. Because I run into a world of making, both physically and mentally. Because I like working with a group of assistants who become another kind of family. Because I like the daily rhythm of going to my studio. Because it's a place to put my pain, my sadness. Because there's a constant hope inside of me that this process will heal me, my family, and the world. Because it helps fight my inertia. Because I like embroidering around my long ago Polish fantasies. Because I can reach into the future with my work. Because I constantly need to try to better understand the immense suffering and pain of my family that I never seem to be able to really understand. And also because I want to get answers to questions for which I know there are no answers.
Well, thank you. That's amazing. It's sort of a guideline for many artists who are making work and thinking about how to make work. Thank you very much for that. Maybe
You're so welcome.
Start the conversation, I'll just start by asking Daniel and Stephen how they first encountered your work. And Daniel, what inspired you to make the film? And Stephen, what made you want to commission Ursula to create a work for the Oliver Ranch? So maybe we'll start with Daniel.
So the film started with, well, Ursula saw a short film of mine that I made called Shooting Phoenix that was shown at Mass MoCA. And she liked the film. And at the time she was mounting, for the Yorkshire Sculpture Garden, where she had had a major exhibition, was mounting an exhibition in Venice together with the Venice Biennale. And she suggested to the Yorkshire Sculpture Park that they commission me to make a short film following the process of that installation. So that was actually the first that I really got to know. I kind of came to know Ursula's work. I knew a bit of it about it just living in New York, but that was the first time that I met her and really got to a sense of her work in depth. So after that, that commission resulted in a 10-minute film. And after it was finished, I had the sense that there was more that I wanted to understand and learn about Ursula. And I was, through the process of doing that piece, I really was moved by her work, but also by her process. I got to know a bit of, how she works with a big group of assistants and how intense and physical and just how close knit they are as a group of working artists. And I think, I just sort of felt like there was something for me as a person and as an artist myself to learn from the process of the possibility of making a longer film. So that's kind of where the idea came from. I sort of just started to explore that idea with Ursula. And at the time, she was embarking on a major commission from Princeton University. And that she described herself was the most complex and difficult of her career so far. So that made me think that this could be sort of a good armature, kind of a narrative arc for a longer film. And she was also eager to have that work documented. So that began the process of my going to her studio a couple times a week and just sort of exploring and seeing where it could go. And my own studio was very close to her studio at the time. So it kind of facilitated the whole process.
Wow, fantastic. And Stephen?
It's interesting. It was great to hear Daniel's comments, but also really wonderful to hear Ursula's opening. It was fabulous as usual. I think Kate and I talked a little bit about it before everybody else joined us about the fact that the ranch project. We also make a joke about it that it was just a 4-H project gone bad. Is that two crazy cousins of mine gave my daughter, when she was 9 years old, 2 lambs for her birthday. And I was thinking lamb chops and she was thinking pets. And like every argument I ever had with her, I lost. And 9 years later, she went away to college and she had these 9 sheep and 5 goats and 200 rabbits. And we were living with just making our neighbors upset. So we bought the ranch originally as a retirement home for these sheep and a weekend place for us. And that was in the 1980s. And we had begun, both my wife and I came from a very modest background, but we're serious collectors. And in the mid 1980s, we got tired of reading more about art on the financial pages and the critical pages. It was about one auction record, and the 80s was this go-go decade. And so we started the ranch as a way. My wife said one day, as I was complaining for the 300th time about some article I read about an auction record, and she said, "Why don't you just invite an artist to come to the ranch and build something that if they move it, it's destroyed. It has to respond to the ranch." And I said, "Oh, that's a good idea." And so we invited somebody, and again, and somebody else. And 3 or 4 years of doing this, we started opening our mind to this creative process, and saw Ursula's work in a gallery in New York, and talked to the gallery dealer representative and said, "We'd like to talk to this person about visiting us in California and talking about something site specific." And she came. Ursula may remember more about our early meeting, but we met and talked about it. And I think I said, "You're wide open. You take any spot in the ranch you want. Make something that you are inspired by. It just has to respond to the land, and if it's moved, it's destroyed." It'd also be good for her to even talk about where the name came from, Iggy's Pride, because it was a really wonderful. It didn't start out that way, so that's where it ended in the discussion we had with her. So it was just an extraordinary experience. I think the one thing that happened that was really wonderful is she was there the longest of any artist, sort of consistently, because what she fabricated was fabricated on site, where a lot of artists may install something on site and do some fabrication, but often the fabrication is done off site in another facility, whether it's bronze or steel or whatever. But in wood piece, all she did is say, "Here, I need several thousand of these pieces of wood." And I said, "Well, I'm in the construction business. I can do that." And the trucks started arriving, and she started working away on it. It was just, and having something that was there that long, it was transformative, not only for us as a ranch and all the staff that worked on the ranch, because by that time my daughter's project with those 2 sheep that turned into 9 sheep had entered several hundred, and we were in a sheep raising business. And so it was a very interesting evolution that led to us seeing again. And there's also one little story with Ursula and I talked about earlier. The team that she brought from New York, who came to California, I didn't thought they were going to be there for 14 months, but I think it was just wonderful to meet these amazing people she brought with her, and how they reacted to the 6 or 7 people that we hired locally, and how what a wonderful marriage that happened there too. So with that, that's the background.
Wow, that's fantastic. So, and maybe this is a good time if Ursula could speak a little bit about the creation of Iggy's Pride, and I think we have some photographs of it. And did you choose the site, or and how did you choose? I mean, I guess Stephen said you already said you chose the site, but maybe you could talk a little bit about how you chose the site and then just the process of building.
As you see, they're sort of wedges, but very complex ones that are actually, with them, they're 77 feet long. You know, the piece, wow. The entire piece is that. And as you see, when during the process, that we built these wedges upside down. In other words, the short parts were up at the top. Can I say can I tell them when they should change the
Yeah,
pictures?
yeah. Mhm.
Sure.
Okay, so could you back up? Oh, okay, all right. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, and 9 has always been a critical number for me. There were 9 people in my family, and I've done a lot with 9. But the most important thing in my work, or one of the most important things, is what happens with the surface. So this fits itself into a niche. It's like a like when you put a book on a shelf. So this is like the backdrop that they're leaning against with their backs, and then there's a flat thing that goes on so that they turn a certain way. Okay, the next one. Yeah, and when you see these things, these little like sticks that look like they go perpendicularly up and down, these are the things that we screwed the 4x4s onto the layer that they're supposed to be screwed on. So this was made layer by layer by layer by layer. And each layer influenced, it's made by 4x4 cedar beams, but each layer influenced the next layer, influenced the next layer. Like this is a really very, I respond to what's already there. And as you see on the piece that's closest to you, that there's a lot of almost chewing up, but it doesn't look like that when it's closer, that there is something that belongs there. That's very, very, not only present, not only dense, but it's very carefully done with a circular saw. All of this was cut by a circular saw. And you could imagine how much time it took, because each surface, had to be done with one 4x4 that was long, that took, a good bit of time to do that one 4x4 cedar beam, and making it feel alive, making it alert, making it, what I needed. So, okay, so next one. That's the forward look. And this one almost looks like, it's combed its hair, it's been glued, so this one feels less wild, but that's only because we're looking at it from that viewpoint. So next one. And you see it's very difficult to see, but these 9 elements are there. And there's many sort of details that you see on the side. I think it's very, very difficult to kind of understand what this is, but you're looking at it from the top, and then they're overlapping one another. So it almost looks like one piece. Next. And these are the people that helped make the that piece for Steve. And
those are his students too, Ursula.
Those are his students. It's so moving. The whole process was so moving. There was such a wonderful, wonderful response, with their relationship. And I remember when the sun was going to be covered, by whatever it was that Charles gave them all the way to look at it, and he gave them whatever it took to see through it so that their eyes wouldn't get hurt. But
Wow.
when you look, when you look when this what the cuts were with a circular saw, you see how complex they are, and you see how much they react to the one, the one below that was just made, and then the one above that. That they really relate to one another. The names, almost make me want to cry, because they worked. I think we started work at least at 6, if not 5 a.m. in the morning. And we worked until 11:30, and the sun was brutal. And it was so brutal that when we mixed the glue, sometimes it would just turn into gel. It was too hard to use. So partially for that reason, but also partially for the reason that we needed to make more than 8 hours a day. We made like a 2-hour break for lunch. And it might have been like from 12 to 2 o'clock. And then we worked from 2 to 6, sometimes 7. It was just like the women that were there would sing, and they wouldn't just sing, they would sing and work hard, and everybody was so willing, so wanting. And I think that this is a huge gift that Charles Yuhash Alvarado had in being their mentor, and being there, totally understanding them, totally knowing Spanish. He was born, speaking Spanish. And he speaks English also beautifully. So it was just a time when we worked very, very hard. We were all very young, so that the hard work suited, our makeup. So we can keep going.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, these are a few more photographs that Steven sent.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of a different view of Iggy.
Sure.
But I was just wondering, do you often build something like Iggy's Pride? Are most of your works built on site, or some of I think in the film we see works being fabricated in the studio and moved. So was this an unusual case where you were building on site, or is it?
Well, these were, my relatively early times. And so I dug into what needed to be done with my whole mind and body, with sort of everything I could. This is not usual. I just did one more piece this way, that I built it on site. To build something on site is far, far, far more difficult than a place where you have all of your equipment, on the inside. You don't have to worry about the rain. You don't have to, that there's you have ways of having machinery, so it's really, this is the most difficult thing, is to build it on site.
Fantastic. I think the documentary shows a bit more about your fascinating process, but I'd be interested to hear a little bit more from you about how you approach various different materials, and how you first started working with wood, and in particular cedar.
I was during the time when the minimalists were in reign. And the minimalists, some of them had a very clear idea of what art was. And if you did anything different from what they said it was like a philosophy. It was like the thing that you had to believe. and it all felt so obnoxious to me, you know, so self-serving and so heartless. Like one of the things that the Judd, you know, the last name. Okay, okay. Is he said we do not have a heart in how we think or what we do, so that there was nothing organic, there was nothing that was welcoming, you know, or there was nothing that had anything to do with feelings.
Mhm.
So you know, and it's not to say that I didn't learn something from the from them, and you know, because they would sometimes put things in a row that felt like they were, you know, likes, or it felt like they were brother, very related. So I mean, I learned some things from them, but I also wanted what was just on the opposite end of what they were thinking or what they were doing. Saul LeWitt was a very close friend of mine, and I'm crazy about him, and I don't put him in that category. Yes, was that your question?
Yeah, but I just wanted to know, I mean, how did you come to your, I mean, obviously you have a very different relationship to the materials than the minimalists, and things are, but
okay, I went to Columbia University. This was 1973 to 76. 3, 4, 5, I don't know, might have been 5. Getting my MFA. And I all they had was steel. And I tried so hard to make this steel like breathe, to make this steel, you know, have color in it. And it's possible, you know, to give it color. Doesn't stay long. But the thing I finally figured out is making a sheet of steel and then clamping it, and then using a torch, you know, to heat it, so that you can heat like things that go in and out and in and out, you know, but it's not, you know, like a it's not a rhythm that's predictable. And then the best thing is that I would pour, I would get something that would put a little dot, you know, that again, I would put the fire on it, and it would stick to the steel, and I put many dots that were in a row. They were almost like paragraphs, and it was almost like a prayer. So I was able to get it to move. I was able to get it, but still, it's not what I wanted. Then there's this monk named Michael Mulhern, who was a huge sweetheart. I was a close friend of his, and he came back with cedar beams, 4x4s. And he had a whole stack of them in the steel studio, because there was no wood studio. And I took my circular saw, and I saw that it was almost like cutting butter, you know, that it wasn't, and you could do such beautiful forms, and you can do so many variations, and it was kind of pink, it was fleshy. You know, so I you know, I ended up that day having, you know, it looked like a snowstorm in the steel studio, and I was in in heaven, but I didn't say to myself, oh, okay, Ursula, you're going to use this for the rest of your life. I mean, you never say that. I mean, I never said that, but I was very happy. So, you know, that kind of, you know, made a real turn.
Huh, amazing. Stephen, you had something?
Yes, there was just one thing I wanted to add. We had a little conversation before you went live about Ursula and these amazing people she brought from New York. I think she brought 3 from New York who worked there. And most of the local hands-on staff that we hired local to the ranch were Hispanics. And the gentleman that she brought, who was sort of the leader of her crew, was from Puerto Rico and spoke Spanish. And so we talked about this. I don't want to go through it all again, but he actually started giving these gentlemen who had never been called gentlemen before, lectures on art, contemporary art, by walking around the ranch and looking at other works that had started there. And it was how the culture she left behind was many of those names that were carved there. First of all, that's carved in a very hidden location, so most people don't see it, except those men who all were, after being there for a year and a half on this project, essentially have now their own gate code, and they come with friends and family whenever their parents or anybody who they know who was with them during this time are in town. They come and to give them a tour of the ranch, which has been so culturally wonderful for the ranch. The other thing that everybody should know is the only artist who ever criticized me after years of doing work, after working on together, was Ursula, who came to me 5 or 6 years after we started and look at her work, and she criticized us for maintaining it too well. She said, no, you're cleaning it every day. It needs to let it age. And we still laugh about it, the ranch staff, because what cedar, like redwood, as it ages, it silvers. And so now you see a lot of those earlier pictures where it's all dark, but now there's parts of the silver, the aging of the wood coming through its other natural aging process. And it's some days it's quite more beautiful today than it was when it was formed. And that's what, 25 years ago or so. So it has really grown on the ranch, and has grown to also be absorbed by the docents who give the ranch tours, to be almost, they argue over who gets to talk about this one next time. And so Ursula has another whole crew of fans in the 12 or 14 docents that are working at the ranch now. So, but those two things really add richness to its culture.
Amazing.
And Steve, I want to say something about you that really moved me, in that I never told you what I was going to do. You gave me the go-ahead. I told you how much cedar I needed, and I actually was to the board, you know, at the end. It was like the last board is exactly what I said, but that's beside the point. But the important thing is, Steve, is that you trusted me, and all I gave you, I think, was, you know, I had some catalog of mine, and I would show you, well, it's going to have some of this maybe, and it's going to have some of this maybe, because I need to have the freedom, you know, to make sure that I do what I need to do. And you were totally, you know, into it.
If you hadn't been as wonderful to work with, that probably wouldn't have been established. But since there are 19 artists that have done projects on the ranch since we started in 1985, we're now, 35 years into this. No artist has ever been restricted in any way for size, scale, cost. I mean, this sounds crazy when I tell people that, but I said no artist ever did anything but the best result of that. I mean, yeah, for Richard Serra, I had to reinforce a couple of bridges to get his piece here.
I know.
But I think that was sort of part of the process. We kind of knew what we were getting into with almost every artist's work, but it all changed. What I thought was going to be the day it started was very different when it ended, but it was always an exciting process and an extraordinary result. I think freeing that creativity is what helps with that result.
That's right.
Maybe Daniel, could you talk a little bit about the challenges of bringing Ursula's process to the screen? I mean, it's really, I really love the documentary, being able to see that process and seeing how each individual cut is made. I mean, I'm kind of a sucker for films that show, I could just watch process all day long. So
Right.
it was just I was like, why can't this be longer?
It was longer, actually. Much longer. I mean, that's the process is really, I think, what drew me in. I mean, I was just amazed by the way Ursula works and the way, you know, that she, as she was saying, that she just responds to what she just did right before, just the way that it's all happening in the moment. Ursula doesn't plan out her work ahead of time. It's just kind of this unfolding, you know, activity that's just you know, really happening as you watch. So I think that was really incredibly exciting for me to film, you know, because I felt like, you know, I wasn't filming something that had been pre-planned. It was just, yeah, it was just all live. So, but in a way, I think that was problematic because I filmed so much. I mean, I think I've went to Ursula's studio, I don't know, dozens of times over several years. So I think I accumulated, you know, many hours of film. So I think finding a way to edit it down and make it understandable and give it a structure was a challenge. So we did have, I worked with a filmmaker, Ken Copeland. I don't know if maybe you know him. He's a well-known filmmaker and an editor who's edited quite a few films about artists. So we worked together over a couple of years, trying to find a way to kind of give form to Ursula's process. And it was at certain points it was about 2 hours long, and I think we showed Ursula a cut at some point pretty early on, and she said, I think you said you felt bored by watching your own process because it was so long. But I think I think bringing in you know, Ursula's backstory and also interviews with other people, I think that gave more insight into it. And it also sort of adding different projects. I think it gave a kind of the relationship between the different materials and processes.
And can you talk a little bit about the decision of bringing in the backstory and maybe your conversations with Ursula about how you were going to do that? Because it's such, I mean, Ursula's story is a tough one. It's not, you haven't had an easy life, and it's a really remarkable story, and it's obviously important to your work, but did you have hesitations about sharing that in the documentary, or were you happy to share that?
I think it took, my initial thought was that the Princeton piece, the copper sculpture, would be the kind of the narrative arc for the film. But I think as we went along and as Ursula and I got to know each other and kind of as Ursula came to trust me and understand where I was going to go with the film, I think she was more willing to go to places that were more private and personal. I think in the beginning, she was a bit hesitant and, you know, sort of saw it more as a professional profile. But I think for me, it gradually became clear, the more I learned about her history and her story, that for the film really to have any weight and depth, that it really had to at least, you know, touch upon some of these things in her past. And it wasn't, I wasn't trying to, you know, say that her work is an immediate, you know, has an immediate relationship to the past. It's more that I just wanted to weave it into the story as a way to kind of, another way of looking at her work. So I think, you know, the film took about 3 years to make. So I think gradually, you know, pretty organically, in a way, similar to how she works, we just kind of day in and day out, just working, and gradually the film went in that direction. And I think Ursula also sensed that would be, add something to the process and to the film. And in terms of talking to other people, that also kind of came about naturally. I mean, Ursula's, I was looking for other voices to bring into the film, and Ursula suggested some people to talk to, and I probably spoke to 2 or 3 times as many people that eventually made it into the film. So it was really kind of through the editing process, like doing many variations of the film, that we kind of came to the final form. And I think one of the difficult things was finding the balance between her process and her work and all these different voices, and also her backstory. So it took quite a while. Yeah.
Ursula, what was the process of the filmmaking like for you? What was because you're obviously participating along the way, and how was that experience?
It was pure pleasure, because Daniel is so kind and he's so insightful. And as the time went on, he dug deeper, with his questions. He's the only one that asked me questions. He's the one that I was responding to with everything that I said. So I give him a lot of credit.
Yeah, because it's
it's not easy to know when you're ready to say the things that I said about my father. And my father is dead, so I guess, and so is my mother, so that gave me, gave me permission. And I don't even know how we came to that topic, but you snipped at it, Daniel, and used it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I felt, it wasn't even, I wasn't trying to go there consciously. It just felt like, somehow, over we must have done, I don't know, 4 or 5 or more interviews. Somehow, I think both of us sort of brought it there,
I think so too. You're right.
It wasn't necessarily
No, you weren't hunting for it. No, I understand that. But I think that it was, a better and better knowing relationship that we had,
right.
Between the two of us. And that, I don't know.
There was also in the way.
And I'm glad we did it.
Yeah. One thing about the film is I didn't do the production, finish the production and then go into the editing. It was kind of this back and forth. I shot for a year, and then we edited it, we put together a version, and then we sensed what was missing, what else was needed. Then we went back and filmed for another 6 months or a year, and then did another version. So it was kind of like this, in a way similar to how Ursula works. Like we were kind of organically trying to find like the balance and make it richer and deeper. So it wasn't, we're sort of responding to the different cuts,
Yeah.
And so that back and forth went on for quite a few years.
5 years.
5 years, yeah.
Wow.
And it was, the film was longer, but there were some disagreements with different people that worked on it, how long it should be. But in the end, I sort of felt like the current length, which is about an hour, really worked the best, because it doesn't it doesn't feel too heavy going into any of these places. It has a lightness, but also kind of goes into pretty deep places, but doesn't dwell on that too much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and like my mom says, you should always leave wanting more. So
Right.
when I feel like when you watch this documentary, you still want to know more, and so it's like you get to take your own journey with the work. But and so for the in the interviews, because you made this over 5 years, were the interviews with Ursula at the beginning, or were they sort of interspersed across those years, or did they come towards the end?
I think, I mean, the last year or so was mostly editing, but probably, I mean, I think we did interviews over 4 years or so, for sure. Yeah, I mean, formal interviews, but also interviews while she was working, you know, which kind of on location, and you know, I pulled her aside, and she says a few words about what she's working on, how she's responding to what's happening around her. So there's lots of variations of types of interviews.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I feel like the hearing Ursula's story and hearing also about your relationship with your father and how it affects the way you work, I think this film would be helpful for a lot of people who are, you know, dealing with their own trauma and trying to figure out a productive way of working through, and just your attitude of turning these difficulties into work that's so complex and powerful and interesting, I think would give permission to a lot of people to, you know, to work through their trauma in really productive ways.
Well, getting a circular saw and some cedar and doing that for a few years, it really cleans up a lot of messes.
That's right.
Yeah, I think
Right.
I cut for 40 years.
Right.
Wow.
I have guys that cut, you know, on big pieces, but I cut myself, you know, many, many years. But that's how I knew how to get them to do what they do.
Uh-huh. But your father worked with wood too, right?
That's true. That's true.
Oh,
and my father worked very, very hard.
So I think you can see, you know, I mean, when you talk about your father and his work, and, you know, I think maybe your brother or your daughter in the film also talk about what an amazing worker your father was.
That's correct. He was.
And then you see that, I mean, you've taken that on clearly in your
My
work.
father had a sigh that he worked with because he worked in a farm during the war. It was for the Germans, because the German men went to fight the war. And when the war finished, the Burgermeister came to my father and said, "Ignaz, why are you leaving me?" See, and he said, "Because I don't want my children to do what I have been doing for you." But he said, at that time he had 6 children. You know, but you have 6 children, because he wanted to keep him. Because on the first day that my father came and used that sigh, and when the Burgermeister saw him, he was totally amazed. And he said, "Ignaz, 7 men could not do what you're doing." You know, so he was really a worker.
Wow. I mean, now I'm going to say we have probably about 10 or 15 minutes left. If there are any questions from our viewers, feel free to enter them into the chat. But meanwhile, we can keep talking, and I was just, maybe we could talk a little bit about the copper piece in the documentary, because that isn't your usual cedar, but it is quite remarkable.
Oh, I did this piece for Princeton, It's called the Andlinger Center. And it's with Todd Williams and Billy Tsien, and I'm crazy about their architecture. And they do their architecture in a way where the light is so magical, you know, with how they let it go into the rooms that they have, or how they do it, you know, on the external parts of the buildings. I mean, they do really amazing things. So this, so when we had that large table at Princeton, and they talked about, well, what would you be thinking of doing, you know, and somehow, you know, I just sort of, you know, spilled it out of my lips that and it seemed so easy, you know, that I would like to hand pound copper and make a piece that way. And it just sounded so good. I've never worked with copper. So they were excited because I was excited. And there it went. And you know, 3 years later, it's so hard to make all of the patterns for each 4x4, for which you have it in the thousands. These were, you know, so hard, but it worked.
Oh, it's quite remarkable. I think we have one question for Daniel about the process of working with the composer for the film.
What's the question?
The question is, can you talk about the process of working with the composer?
The composer is Simon Tawfiq, who's a New York-based musician composer. He's an incredible musician, and I think he really did a beautiful job. We started fairly late, I guess maybe 6 months towards the end of the film, of the process. So, you know, we had a rough cut, and you know, the process I sort of worked with him to going over each scene and each part of the film to kind of find the right mood, and then he would propose some temp music that we would kind of refine, and then finally, once we nailed it down, then he would do a piece, and then we would kind of work together to get it further refined. So that went back and forth for I guess 4 or 5 months until we came to the final. It's really, you know, trying to find you know, what you want to say in the film. You know, what parts should have you know, seeing the film as a whole, and trying to have the music kind of take you on a certain direction, certain journey.
And what I was grateful to him for is that he did not overwhelm, you know, the visuals that we're having at all. He was so sensitive to that, and I'm so appreciative for that.
Yeah, that's why I really, you know, a lot of composers, sort of, the music draws attention to itself, but I think his music really lets the film speak, and lets the visuals speak, and kind of supports the film rather than kind of calling attention.
Yeah, very elegant. We have a question. I think somebody came in late, and they're asking what the film is about. So for those of you who joined and maybe haven't seen the film Ursula von Rydingsvard Into Her Own is about the work of Ursula von Rydingsvard, who we're speaking with today, and about all of her sculptures. So I'll answer that question.
And I think that the film represents the process pretty well, really well.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how all the pieces come together. But I think I looked at another, I'm not sure if it's in this film or in another film I watched about you, but there was a part where you talked about the inside of the sculptures being as important as the outside, which I found also quite fascinating. I think we have another question here. It says, this is from Lucy, who says, Ursula, can you talk about what it feels like when you finish a piece? There's such an intensity while you're creating a piece, such an immediacy, and when it ends, is there sorrow?
I think there's only a sorrow if I struggled with it and couldn't get it to do what I needed it to do. And it still looks bad, that's when I don't feel good, and then the best scenario is if it has a great home, after you make it, so a home that'll take care of the piece, that'll appreciate it. It's like sending, a child off. But it's, but there are some pieces where I look at now and say, wow, but I don't think that I do it immediately, because immediately you've been with this, say for 9 months, and you don't say wow at the beginning, because there are no wows, because everything, you've sort of studied all the details. So, yeah.
It's great. We have another question from Jean-Pierre, who says, hello, Ursula. What is your favorite material to work with? And do you explore any new materials to this day?
Well, one could say my favorite material is cedar, but if the truth be told, I try to get rid of the cedar, almost daily. I say, here comes another truck. Ursula, let this be your last, just so that you can explore more. But then I got to like a fourth stomach of a cow. I was working on that, and then I worked with other materials, and it just seems, whether I like it or not, whether I like the cedar or not, it just seems that cedar is the best thing that I communicate through visually. It just seems to be the best. And then, of course, I have the pieces that I cast, and I all of the pieces that I've cast, I make the full scale model. It's crazy, that sometimes takes 9 months to make. That just the full scale model, so they can make it in, they can cast it.
Huh. So the model is made from cedar and then it's cast.
Yes, in bronze.
In bronze. So this, and we've got a picture here of you working, and is this a couple of images of the sculpture?
That's right. These are the perforations that make for the lace part of the bronze piece. And this is the lure. It's beautiful when there's a light that comes through the body. This is just a very small portion of the piece, but the light will come through this, and you can see the sun through it. You can see the snow through it. You can see the rain through it. It's and all of them are really carefully thought out. Yes, this is the top. part is the lace. And it is very inviting. It makes the metal, feel so welcoming and so organic.
Really amazing. We have one last question, which is where can we watch the movie? And you can see the movie at bmpfa.org on our Watch From Home platform. And do any of you have any closing words or thoughts before we go? Oh, wait, we have another question from Richard Friedman. How do you determine the scale of your pieces? And do you have a plan in mind, or does it evolve?
It mostly evolves, although if I don't have something in my mind that I'm yearning to do, obviously I can't even begin. But I really love groping when I work. That is, each 4x4 cedar beam that I draw on for the cutters to cut. And the drawings are really not straight lines, a lot of straight lines, but they're really fancy. So when they do that, so I always think that I am just groping, for the next thing, and then the next thing, and then the next thing, because that's the way you keep the piece alive. If you know ahead of time that what you're going to have, exactly what you're going to have, I would think it would be so boring and horrible. Like you're in jail. You've gotten a recipe of what you're supposed to do, and that's no fun.
That's somebody following on that comment. Somebody says it's so interesting to watch the close-ups of your fingers running over the cedar, and they say, "What is the cedar saying to you?"
The cedar doesn't talk to me, but except I know that I have done things to the cedar that it never thought it could go through, that it never thought it could be so, so extremely, it's not shattered, but so extremely used to things that are so extreme with the cutting.
I watched the cedar for 14 months and all I could say was ouch.
And what does the cedar say now? What is it like to, Stephen, what is it like to live with one of Ursula's sculptures and see it change over time?
Well, it changes very slowly, and being in the construction business, and I've watched a lot of those kinds of things happen to materials. But what's really good is to see the terrain around it and go through 4 seasons every year, from the winter where it's dark, and the summer and the fall, and then the beautiful spring where wildflowers are all around it. And every time I see something, there must have been 1,000 magical visits that I've made there that said, gosh, why don't I have my camera with me? But I don't carry it all the time. And I think that's the joy of seeing these works in the site and the site installations for the artist's works, and see them evolve over time. And none has evolved with as much stability and elegance as Ursula's. It's just really been a lovely thing to be around.
Wow. Another question is, Ursula, do you have advice for young artists?
Don't make art unless you absolutely have to, unless you can't live without it.
Great. Maybe that's a good place to close.
Oh, God, it's pretty pessimistic, though, isn't it?
I don't know if it's pessimistic or hopeful.
Yeah. That's what I meant it to be.
Would you? But maybe you have something more positive you'd like to say if you think that wasn't hopeful enough?
For the young people, this would have to be too long a conversation. But I really wish them well, and I really think that this is an especially hard moment to start making art, or to be making art, and on the other side is that when I walk into my studio, it's my sanctuary. It's the only place that I can speak my mind. It's the only place where I direct my life and direct my thoughts that could be really extreme. So it has in it so much potency, so much power. And I feel that I have led a life, that is so privileged. And I actually have the studio that's been a dream of my life. I have that studio. So if it doesn't work in there, it's not the fault of anything on the outside. It's my doing, and there's really, a wonderful feeling to know that you have control over this. Not that it's a real control, because you'd be surprised about when you're working, you think you're going somewhere else that you don't get to, or that you get to in a very different way. And all of that is like discoveries, all of that is exciting. And then you dip into parts of yourself that you rarely dip into, because and it feels like the older I get, the more I dip into the places, and I don't know whether are in my mind or in my body, but they're things that kind of coax you, that coax you into the next move, and of course it comes through my eyes, because the eyes in the end tell me what to do and what not to do. Is that more positive?
That was fantastic. That was
Thank you.
really wonderful. I mean, both are good advice. It's good advice to make art if you absolutely have to, and then talking about the process is also very helpful. But I would like to thank all of you for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, and such a pleasure watching the film. And I know wherever I go, I'm going to try and seek out your work, Ursula, and Daniel. I'm going to try and look at your photographs and your films and visit the Oliver Ranch show. It's been really very special. So thanks so much for your time and your insight and all your work.
It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you all. Thank you all. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.